Judge's Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and GatheringMagic.com. Support our show by visiting both websites. Now it's time for Judge's Corner with David Green.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Judge's Corner. In today's episode, I thought we could talk about Commander, which is a very well-known and popular casual format, typically played in multiplayer games, but can also be played like a regular game of Magic. A lot of the rules surrounding Commander are exactly the same rules that you'll see when you play Magic any other day, but there are a lot of rules that are very specific to Commander that we're going to cover in this episode, such as you can only play one copy of any card in your deck, with the exception of basic lands or cards that break that rule. And your deck has to be exactly 100 cards, not any more or not any less. And one of those cards is set aside as your commander for the deck. The commander is something that sets a lot of characteristics for your deck. We're going to explain exactly what that is and how commanders work, along with giving you a few examples next. So, the commander of your deck is going to be the leader of all of the cards in your deck. It has to be a legendary creature. It can be a legendary creature enchantment or a legendary creature artifact, but it has to be both legendary and a creature on the face of the card. Next, let's talk about a commander's color identity, because it'll be what defines what we can and cannot play within our deck. First off, the color identity of a card is the sum of all mana symbols within the border of the card. Just because a card is mono green in terms of casting cost doesn't mean it'll always be a mono green card in terms of color identity. Lands are also subject to color identity scrutiny, even though they're colorless cards, because we're looking at what mana symbols are printed on them. A taiga, for example, has both red and green color identities, but a fetch land has none, even though it can fetch cards outside of your general's colors. This is because we only look at the mana symbols on the entire card, and not the mana words on the card. So, for example, if I'm playing Omnath as my commander, I can only play cards with green color identities. Cards like Giant Solifuge and Abrupt Decay are out of the question. I also cannot play things like Garruk Relentless because of his color indicator being both black and green. However, with Rise the Exiled, I can play black, green, or black and green cards because of his black activated ability. Nicol Bolas would allow me to play red, blue, black, or a combination of any of those within my deck. A 5-color commander would enable me to play any color card within my deck. And colorless cards without a color identity can be played in any deck, but when using a general like Kozilek, I can only use colorless cards within it. Also, it's really important to note that reminder text does not determine a card's color identity, such as in the case of older copies of Trinisphere or Extort. Only the colors of the mana cost and the colors within the mana symbols on the card text count towards a card's color identity. Color symbols within italicized text are considered reminder text and do not count towards a card's color identity. Also, things like the word red, like for example with Lavinia, do not count towards a card's color identity. So now that we understand what a commander is, let's talk about how to play with your commander. When you play a commander, it starts off in the zone called the command zone. This is where emblems or a few unrelated things go. In order to cast it, you have to follow any normal restrictions or cost additions or reductions as you would as if you were casting any card from your hand. However, when it dies or gets exiled, it'll end up somehow back in the command zone. And every single time you cast it from the command zone, past the first time, there's something called a commander tax of 2 additional generic mana that gets taxed onto the card. So, for example, if you cast it the first time, it's just going to cost whatever the original cost was. The second time from the command zone, it's going to cost 2 additional generic mana. The third time, we're talking 4 additional. After that, it's going to be 6, and then 8, and so on and so forth, every single time you cast it from the command zone. And there's no way to ever reduce this number. But wait, how does your commander ever get back to the command zone? If a commander would be sent to the graveyard from anywhere, or sent to exile from anywhere, you have the option of instead putting it into the command zone. This is a replacement effect that only the commander's controller can choose to do. Bouncing it to the hand or shuffling it back into the deck won't allow that replacement event to happen, only if it would be sent to the grave from anywhere or sent to exile from anywhere. So for example, let's say I have Child of Alara as my commander and it's on the battlefield, but it gets destroyed. Now I have a really important thing to decide. Am I going to let its trigger event happen and let it die, or am I going to send it back to the command zone? If it dies, its trigger will occur and destroy everything, but it will never get a chance to go back to the command zone unless it changes zones again. But if I send it back to the command zone, it doesn't actually die. The replacement effect instead lets it go straight to the command zone and it never actually touches the graveyard. So its triggered effect won't actually happen. In another example, let's say my Child of Alara gets returned to my hand with a boomerang, and I've already cast it 3 times from the command zone. Do I have to keep paying the tax if I play it from my hand? The answer is no, because the commander tax only applies from when the commander is being cast from the command zone. If it's being cast from anywhere else, it's kind of cheating on the tax. You get a tax rebate, as it were. Unlike regular games of Magic, your life total starts at 40, not 20. But if you reach 0 or less life, or if you get 10 poison counters, or if you attempt to draw from an empty deck, you're going to lose the game. But there's one more stipulation for losing in a game, and that's 21 commander damage. What I mean by that is, if a single commander, a single card, the card designated as the commander for a particular deck, deals you individually 21 damage by itself, then you're going to lose the game to commander damage. Remember though, you're going to keep track of each individual's commander damage separately. They don't all cumulatively hit you. And if for some reason a commander stops being the regular commander that you know it as, it still doesn't stop being a commander in terms of what we consider a commander in the game. Say, for example, if an Akroma is turned face down because it was morphed into play, but it's the commander of someone's deck, that Akroma, even though it's a nameless card, is still the commander, and it's still going to deal you 2 more commander damage to your total. However, keep in mind that any commander damage is accumulated, but it still deals regular damage to your regular life total as well. So mulligans and commander are a little bit different than what you might know. Normally we draw a hand of 7 cards, take a look at it and say, nah, I don't like this, and shuffle it all back away into our deck, draw that many cards, -1. For commander, it's a little bit different. We'll take a look at our 7 cards and say, I don't like 4 of these. I'm going to take these 4 and put them face down on the table. And I'm going to draw that many -1. So in this example, I'll draw 3 cards. Now I have a hand of 6 cards and I say, almost ready, but these 2 cards right here aren't good. So I'll take them, put them aside, and I'll draw that many -1. So I'll draw just 1 card. Now I have a hand of 5 cards. I'll take a look at it and say, yep, I like this hand. From here, we'll take the cards we've been putting face down and shuffle them back into our deck. Put the deck down and we're ready to begin. Keep in mind though that when we're playing a game of multiplayer Magic, that your first mulligan is always free. So that first mulligan is going to go from 7 to 7. Next, let's take a look at a few other rules that are specific to Commander but don't come up that often. Any mana added from outside of your commander's color identity is added to your mana pool as if it were colorless mana instead. So, for example, if you control a Chromatic Lantern and you gain control of your opponent's Chameleon Colossus, well, unfortunately, you won't be able to activate its ability. This is because even though Chromatic allows you to add green, when you add green to your mana pool, it'll simply be colorless mana, and you won't be able to pay for the Changeling's ability. Next, if a commander is exiled face down, then it has to go back to the command zone if any player would be allowed to look at it and know that it's the commander. For example, if you exiled a commander face down that was shuffled back into your opponent's deck with Praetor's Grasp, then you would have to put it back in the command zone if you selected it. This is because you're allowed to look at it and you know that it's the commander, so it has to go back to the command zone. However, if you exiled a commander with Pyxis of Pandemonium, then it would sit in exile forever until somebody was able to look at it and figure out that it's the commander, at which point it would be returned to the command zone. Another neat example I figured I'd talk about is one with Mimic Vat. Let's say that my commander dies and I let it go to the grave, but you have a Mimic Vat, and then you want to try to take it and put it under it. Well, I could let that happen, but since it's going to go to the exile from the grave, I can now instead decide to put it straight into my command zone, and you won't get it. However, if I have a Mimic Vat and I want to imprint it onto my own Mimic Vat, well then, if I decide to go through those motions and imprint it, I can certainly let that happen. Another important thing to note though is that the tokens created off a Mimic Vat, even though they're copies of my commander, are not commanders, so they will not incur commander damage. Also, it's important to note that if the commander would die, but instead is put into the command zone, Mimic Vat never actually triggers. This is because the commander never actually touches the graveyard, much like in our Child of Alara example. The last thing I want to talk about is how sideboards are no longer allowed when playing Commander. They used to be something that you could use, but recently they were removed. But if you and your playgroup want to change the rules up or have specific rules or restricted lists for your specific league, that's perfectly fine. Whatever you guys want to use as your own house rules, have at it. So, that's it for our Commander episode. If you have any questions, make sure to send us an email at judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com. Or go ahead and check out Commander's official website at mtgcommander.net. And until next time, remember, it's perfectly okay to attack Timmy if we suspect he has weapons of mass destruction. Let's use our Commander-in-Chief to go in and look for those Oblivion Stones.